Hey everyone, Simon here from Top Tennis Training, and in this video we're going to compare the Andre Agassi backhand to the Novak Djokovic backhand. We're going to look at some of the key similarities between both shots, but also some of the key differences. So to begin, let's talk about the grip for both players. So Agassi, with the bottom hand, his right hand, he holds the grip in that continental grip, which is the most commonly used grip for two-handed backhands on that bottom hand. In the top hand, he uses a very strong Eastern forehand grip. Now within a grip, I can have variations. I can have a very strong Eastern forehand grip, where the hand is quite far round, almost close to becoming a continental, or I could have it closer to the semi-western. So Agassi's is quite close to that continental range. So he's got a very strong Eastern forehand grip on the top hand. Now if we compare this to Djokovic, on the bottom hand he has very similar to Agassi, the continental grip with the right hand, and with the top hand he has in between an Eastern forehand and semi-western. So he's not all the way around to a semi-western, but he's not a strong Eastern like Agassi, so it's in between both. Now at the start of the swing, Agassi will have his racket slightly open to the sky. The sides of the strings he's going to make contact with, he'll have the strings, instead of being in that neutral position, which is very common, he'll have his strings slightly open. This will be very important for later on in the shot, as you'll find out in this video. Whereas if we compare that to Djokovic, Djokovic will close his racket face at the start of the swing. So he's preparing with his racket closed. Sometimes you'll see his racket all the way down, like so. This is more common with players who have grown up on clay, players who want more topspin on their backhand. They'll tend to close the strings at the start of the swing, and this is what Djokovic does. So he's starting his backhand with the strings close to the ground, and later on he'll have them in that neutral position. Agassi, on the other hand, has his strings slightly open. Both players have a very good unit turn, that coiling with the upper body as soon as they recognize that the ball is coming to their backhand. So from that ready position, waiting like so, they'll see the ball's coming there, and they have that initial unit turn. This right shoulder is now getting side on towards the net. And it's almost as if their chin is touching their right shoulder when they start that preparation phase. Both players have the racket head higher in the grip when they're preparing the racket head. So even though Agassi's strings are slightly open, his racket head is higher in his grip when he's preparing for that shot. The same thing with Djokovic. He'll have a slight dip where the strings are closed, but then he lifts the racket head and it's above the grip level. This is crucial in producing power and producing leverage in the racket head and in the arms and the hand. So both players reach a very good power position where the racket head is higher than the grip level. And something that they share in common is that both players don't have the racket too high like a Sharapova, but they're definitely not level like a Hewitt. They're somewhere in between where the racket head is higher than the grip. Now the difference is that Agassi likes to keep his racket more on the left side of his body. Imagine a clock now. If Agassi was facing 12 o'clock when he's looking at his opponent, he never actually allows the racket to go past 7 or 8 o'clock. So he always keeps his racket on the left side of the body. Djokovic, on the other hand, will take his racket slightly further back, where he's all the way back here, closer to 6 o'clock. Now this could be due to the fact that Djokovic is more flexible than Agassi. Djokovic really believes in that flexibility and has longer arms. He's a little bit taller than Agassi, and he also has a longer range of motion. So it could be just the fact that Djokovic has that range of motion in the arms that allow him to go further back compared to Agassi, where it's a little bit more compact and on the left side of his body. The other key difference in that power position will be the angle of the strings. Djokovic tends to have his strings neutral to the left side of the court, whereas Agassi tends to have his strings slightly open, and this will allow him to flatten out that shot and really hit through the ball. Later in the swing, Agassi's strings will remain like this, and it's almost as if he's hitting the bottom of the ball and scooping the ball, directing it towards that target. So once again, both players reach a very good power position, and this is something that any two-hander should be looking to do. If we look at the best two-handers of all time, players like Agassi, Djokovic, now Bandian of course, and players like Safin, they all reach a very similar power position where the racket head is higher in the grip, and this will allow them, this creates that leverage in the arm and the racket, and later on this will then translate into force over the ball, but it also gives them space to accelerate. If my racket is level like this, the distance from here to the contact zone is limited. I don't have much space to accelerate. Whereas when I lift this racket now, I don't have to go higher with my arms, but now I have more space to accelerate the racket. Imagine a plane trying to take off. If we have a plane with a limited runway, maybe it's only 50 or 100 meters, that plane is going to struggle to get up to speed to actually take off. If we have a runway that's 1 or 2 miles long, that plane can really accelerate fully before lifting off the ground. Now if we think about it in tennis terms, if my swing from this position to contact is limited, my racket head speed at the time of contact is also going to be limited. Whereas if I have space now to accelerate that racket, at the time of contact my racket is traveling through the contact zone quite quickly, and this translates to more power and more energy on that ball. Another thing that both players share is the fact that they load really well on the back leg, the left leg, when they're in that power position. Whenever Djokovic or Agassi have time, they'll step out with this left leg behind the ball, behind the line of the ball. So if my contact point would be here, I want my left leg behind that contact point so that I can load up on this back leg. I have now about 80% of my body weight on this left leg. Then I step forward and I can then have that weight shift as I go through the contact zone. If I go too early onto the right foot, if I do this, now my weight has already shifted onto the front foot. It's going to be very hard for me to actually follow the ball and produce a lot of power on that shot, and more importantly, weight of shot. Whereas by loading up on this back leg, now I can then step in through the contact zone, then this creates that heavier shot, and it makes it much harder for my opponent to attack that ball because of the weight of the shot. From the power position now, there are two key differences. The first one being that Agassi drops the racket with the strings slightly open, which will allow him to really flatten out that ball and almost scoop under the bottom of the ball. Djokovic, however, will have his racket neutral or his strings slightly closed when he has that racket drop. The other thing that happens is Agassi's wrist rarely ever goes into wrist flexion, and this is where the wrist goes from this position, the right wrist, into this racket drop position where the wrist has now flexed. My wrist is in that flexion position. Djokovic, on the other hand, has his racket go from here to here, and he has a very loose wrist in that racket drop. And then he comes up to the point of contact, and his left arm will then extend through the contact zone, but his right arm is still bent. Whereas if we compare that to Agassi, from this position here, Agassi never allows his wrist to go into that flexion position. It's always in that neutral position once he has that racket drop. This position is extended, he has wrist extension. As he starts the racket drop, he now really emphasizes the bottom of the racket leading the way onto the oncoming ball. So it's almost as if he's shining. Imagine there was a torch coming out of the bottom of my racket, and it's shining towards the oncoming ball. Agassi really emphasizes this, and this is creating that racket lag in the backhand. We talk often about the racket lag on the forehand, where the bottom of the racket is leading the way and the racket head is lagging behind, but Agassi does this extremely well on the two-handed backhand. From this position, he's now letting the racket lag behind the grip, and he's pointing the butt cap of the racket towards that ball, which will also now give him leverage over that ball, that force over the ball. So from here, Agassi will now extend his right arm fully into the point of contact, and then his left arm will extend fully, and he'll drive through the contact zone with extended arms. It's very much like a baseball swing. From this position in baseball, the player will have the bottom hand extending through the contact zone, and then the top hand extends all the way out towards the target, and then both arms finish up. This is very much like Agassi's backhand. It's very much an old school baseball swing where you're driving through the contact zone towards your target, allowing you to have a longer contact zone. And this is also due to the fact that Agassi grew up playing with wooden rackets. And this was a very common thing. If we think about players like Bjorn Borg, they had long extensions on their backhand because they were not able to produce the same power as the modern rackets. So in order for them to hit powerful and flat shots, they had to really extend out through the contact zone and create a long contact zone. So from this position, Agassi's bottom hand, the right hand, really extends out. He then extends out with the left hand, and he extends out towards his target fully before finishing. Whereas if we compare that to Djokovic, Djokovic has dropped, his wrist has gone into flexion, his right arm remains bent, but his left arm now extends out, he goes up, and he follows over the shoulder. So a little bit different at the contact point. Agassi is a lot more stiffer through the contact zone, a lot more extended with both arms, whereas Djokovic is more relaxed with the right elbow, but extending with the left arm. So he's still getting great extension through the contact point, using that top hand to extend outwards towards the target. Both players will then finish over the shoulder. Agassi finishes a little bit shorter, a little bit more compact. This could be due to the fact that he's a little bit stiffer than Djokovic, whereas Djokovic has a little bit longer extension because he's more flexible and has a longer range of motion. Now both players also have great weight transfer through the shot. Djokovic, whenever he has time, he'll load up on this back leg and he'll step forward with the right leg and he'll transfer his weight through the contact point and then use the pivot step to aid the recovery, but also allow his hips to fully open. Exactly the same with Agassi. He's loading up on this back leg. As he steps forward now, he has that heel to toe action with the front leg. He extends through the contact point, he rotates, and then his back foot follows, and that will aid the recovery and allow the hips to fully open through the contact point. So some of the key differences, once again, Agassi has a little bit stronger Eastern forehand grip on that top hand. Djokovic closes his strings at the start of the swing, whereas Agassi likes to keep his strings very much open to the sky slightly. From this power position, Agassi really emphasizes this racket lag and extending the right arm all the way out. He then drives through almost like a baseball swing and almost guiding the ball towards his target, whereas Djokovic has the wrist going into flexion and then his left arm takes over towards the target. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below as well, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon. All the best. Simon from TTT signing off.